What does healing really look like? I want to go back to where I started, inspiration from a good friend, and she gave me the title The Art of Nonlinear Healing. And that hit home because when we think about how we want healing to look, we imagine this beautiful progression upwards where all of a sudden things just get easier. We figure things out, we get back to living our so-called life, and in reality it looks more like a windy kind of curvy circular spiral. You go up like a ski jump and then you crash and burn. And then you come up, you see the light, things get better. Maybe you take a dip again. And I think there's something to honoring that when we let go of the idea that things improve along this predictable path and come back to the idea that maybe we have far less control than we would like. Again, we sort of give up that fight and that inherent stress response when we're trying to grip our way to health. So, as time starts to clear up this noise, we might also start to realize that so much of that inner chatter in our head seems to be causing the majority of the problems. And when we start to look at that and start to listen to that more, we might really hear a voice that we don't really like. It could be hypercritical, it could be a perfectionist, it might be really, really worrisome and fearful. I hear all the time people wondering, oh, when are things going to get easier? How can they just find a way to live their life right now? Wishing they could have things be a certain way, wondering if they had this, then maybe they'd be able to get it together. Or even that voice that's telling them you're too sensitive. What's wrong with you? Why can't you figure this out? Why can't you lose weight? Why can't you gain weight? Getting curious about the kind of tone and quality and texture of that voice can free up a little bit of space. And even bring in that awareness and curiosity when we realize, whoa, wait a second, if I can watch that voice, aren't I the awareness of that hypercritical, worrisome, fearful, kind of crazy, flailing voice, that very, very judgmental voice that's always trying to label things as good or bad or great or ugh. If we really bring that awareness back to that voice, all of a sudden we have some space from that interpretation of our experience. And then with that, all of a sudden, it's no longer as terrible and depressing and hopeless and doomful as we may have thought. And coming back to this idea of nonlinear healing, I really appreciate the idea of seeing healing from chronic illness sort of like a roller coaster. You can either grip and wait for it to end and feel like it's the most terrible and terrifying experience, or you can get really excited, really curious, and just go with that ride. And thinking about that even further, if this experience you're having, if you don't know when it's going to end, but you know it's going to end eventually, why not make the best of it? You're gonna go through it anyways, so if you can find a way to really extract the goodness and extract the richness out of this experience, just think of the lessons you can pull from that when you no longer feel the need to fight it, but can embrace it for all of the teachers and opportunities that bubble up in this. Even just the wisdom that comes with going through some pretty intense feelings, intense emotions, intense experiences. Think of how grateful you can be looking back, realizing that your body, your mind, whatever this awareness is far stronger than you realized. And knowing that you made it through something that you thought you couldn't, landing yourself here, that kind of strength, that fortress of robustness that you build up, you can't really just get that. You got to go through it. You got to learn from this. Or I should say you can learn from this. So when we again think of times where it feels hopeless and you're feeling so dragged down by this chronic illness that you are losing sight of the bigger picture, that's the time where what helped me most was really bringing in that curious observer mind, where I start to build in a little bit of space from my experience, and then can bring in that curious voice that feels like it's almost excited to see what will happen next. It's excited to even embrace the idea of how bizarre this human experience is, and how in that space we actually do have a bit of control in terms of our reactivity. Are we going to clench up with fear, or can we open to this experience and really just let it be what it is? Maybe even bringing some humor into it, or the slightest bit of gratitude for how rich this human experience is when we slow down to notice the details. And as we look at that hypercritical voice, or that worrisome voice, or maybe that very depressed and suicidal voice, the goal here is not to fix it or get rid of it, but really to step back and listen to it and watch it and get curious about what it's saying and seeing what comes of that. Because what if this voice that feels like it's taking up all of your space and scrutinizing and nitpicking and interpreting your experience, what if that voice is here to help guide you and teach you? All of a sudden, we take our symptoms less personally. We realize, oh, okay, if this experience is here to help me, I don't have to be so afraid of it. And, all right, if this can help me find a greater understanding of who I am, what will the ripple effects be beyond this experience? Just thinking of, oh, when I'm in a better mood, when I'm feeling more like myself, when I'm feeling healthier and I'm out and about and I'm interpreting and interacting with the world, how does that change? Thinking of the ripples beyond you. So, again, what does this healing path look like? We don't know. It's that spiral up and down all over the place. We know that as time goes on, when we really start to rewire the brain and bring strength and non-judgment and that very curious, kind voice to it, all of a sudden things do start to simplify. We realize we can get through whatever curveballs the world throws at us, bring on COVID-19 times 2, the shutdown of the economy and everything in between. All right, if we realize we have the strength to handle that, we know that going forward, we can meet whatever challenge comes our way. So there is something to learn even from that. And practicing this as much as we find, or every time we find our voice starting to spiral, to think ahead, to create that kind of panic. What am I doing? What's happening? What's going on with me? What's wrong with me? Oh my gosh, things are overwhelming too. Whoa. Look at what my brain is doing. And then with that awareness, stepping back and saying, okay, I can lovingly and intelligently make a different choice here. So, if this kind of work resonates with you, feel free to drop a comment below. I'm always curious to hear how something resonates, if it was helpful, if you want to hear more of something else. But I would encourage you all to really get hyper curious about that voice in your head and really start to watch it and really let yourself sit in that awareness of watching that voice and wondering, what can you learn from this? How can you use this to heighten your sense of vitality, that inner knowing that, wow, this human experience is bizarre. Might as well enjoy this roller coaster, get comfortable embracing the curves, the up, the downs, the curveballs, and getting into it in a way that feels worthwhile, enjoyable, fun, inspiring. That's the juice.
Some scrub, Jay. We've got some planks, some learning, got some videos, some slippers.